charismatic species often fall through the cracks. So in terms of the illegal bird trade in Europe, a lot of the birds that are affected by it, for example goldfinches, they're not threatened, so their population size is stable, which means there isn't this sense of urgency that something needs to be done, but they are nonetheless protected. So we know that between 11 and 36 million birds are illegally killed in the Mediterranean each year, but we actually don't know what happens with them afterwards, mainly because there is no data on it and because obviously illicit activity is difficult to trace. Only bred species or bred in captivity are allowed to be traded in the EU. But what happens then is that a lot of people catch wild birds when they're young. They put rings on the legs of the young birds, and so as they grow, it looks like they have been bred in captivity even though they were caught from the wild. But then it is very difficult to trace back whether that bird was caught from the wild or whether it was indeed bred in captivity.
You have all these sorts of peculiarities that are just ignored. For example, in the Romanian case, when you consider illegal logging as a criminal activity, you don't take into consideration the fact that a large part of population, mostly 40%, all rural population of the country, rely on timber. Roma population do not own land or forest, but they need timber for subsistence, for heating their houses, for cooking, because they don't have access to gas grid or to other source of fuel. And by considering all of them criminals, historical practices of inequality are obliterated.
When you have one sort of trade is criminalised but the other is legal, it provides this loopholes in the system where wild caught caviar can be laundered into the systems of legal trade, and so you have this kind of grey market that emerges where you've got both legal and illegal products for sale on the same shelves, but they just seem legal when that's probably not the exact reality.
There are indications that European citizens are coming across to, for example, engage in illegal hunting in Serbia and then trade the illegally shot birds back into Italy to be consumed. The consumption of songbirds in restaurants in Italy, for example, they're being marketed as regional delicacies to tourists, as a kind of traditional dish that they need to try. In Albania, around 30,000 goldfinches are thought to be trapped each year. The keeping of birds as pets, particularly in Albania, has roots in the Ottoman traditions, and so songbirds feature in almost every house facade in big cities like Tirana, for example. So a lot of policy responses don't actually tackle this demand that is very rooted in these kind of national traditions.
The geopolitical aspect of illegal wildlife trade is very important because mostly we discuss about species or habitats that are not bound to a particular territory or to a particular member state. And it is important to try to approach this problem as a transboundary issue and not necessarily as a nation-state problem, and there is a lot of space for improvement here.
Romania and Bulgaria are relatively new EU member states, and there's a sense that the blame for sturgeon poaching and illegal caviar trade is placed upon these countries because they're poaching hotspots. But then the other side of it is that with caviar, it's wealthy European consumers. They want to acquire the illegal caviar, so it's a lot of wealth driving the illegal trade. Supposedly legal businesses that are engaging in illicit activities are kind of getting away with it further up the supply chain, so I think that the enforcement should be targeted more specifically there.
The issue with focusing policy responses particularly on source community and source countries, for example in the Western Balkans, is that only responds to one side of the problem. Policymakers should really step up efforts to tackle demand in consumer countries, and in this case that points towards EU member states like Italy or also Malta and Cyprus.